The Galactic Council chamber hummed with the collective disdain of 1,000 species as Ambassador Vex Thul of the Korthani hegemony gestured dismissively at the empty podium reserved for Earth's representative. 73 cycles, he chittered, through his translator, mandibles clicking with amusement. 73 cycles since we extended the invitation to these humans. Not a single response. Not even an acknowledgement. High Arbiter Kepharon, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns, resonated with what passed for laughter among her kind. Perhaps they lack the cognitive capacity to understand our communications. The hegemony's xenobiological surveys suggested primitive neural development, barely past the stone-throwing phase. From across the vast amphitheater, Warlord Drakmor of the Vorthak Dominion slammed a massive fist against his hover throne's armrest, the sound echoing like thunder. Stone throwers or not, they've colonized 17 systems in the Outer Rim. My scouts report industrial activity that shouldn't be possible for such a young species. Industrial activity? Vex Thul's laugh was a harsh rasp. Building mud huts on airless rocks hardly qualifies as civilization. The hegemony has monitored their expansion. Crude chemical rockets, primitive fusion drives, laughably basic energy weapons. They pose no threat to the established order. The Council's attention turned to the massive holographic display dominating the chamber's center, showing the galaxy's political boundaries. Earth's territory appeared as a small cluster of yellow dots in the galaxy's unfashionable outer spiral arm. Insignificant specks compared to the vast swaths of space controlled by the Council's major powers. High Arbiter Kepharon's form shifted, her crystalline structure rearranging into what her species considered a posture of contemplation. The question remains, why do they ignore us? Even the most primitive species respond to our overtures, if only to grovel for protection or beg. For technology, fear, suggested Counselor Nixara of the Zelthani Collective, her serpentine form coiled elegantly around her speaking platform. They recognize their inferiority and hide like prey animals, hoping we'll forget they exist. Warlord Drakmor's scarred features twisted into what might have been a grin. Or arrogance. Perhaps they believe themselves above responding to their betters. The chamber erupted in what passed for laughter among the assembled species, chittering, resonating, growling, and harmonizing in a cacophony of derision. The very idea that these silent humans might consider themselves equals was the greatest joke the Council had heard in decades. Motion to proceed with standard integration protocols, Vex Thul announced, his voice cutting through the laughter. If these humans won't respond to diplomacy, perhaps they'll understand force. A few demonstrations of superior firepower usually bring primitives to heel. Seconded, Kepharon's crystalline voice rang like struck bells. The Korthani hegemony's third fleet should suffice for such a minor operation. What resistance could stone throwers possibly offer? As the Council voted unanimously to authorize pacification measures against human space, none noticed the faint energy signature lurking at the edge of their sensor arrays, a ghost in the void that had been listening, learning, and preparing for this moment. Far in the outer darkness, beyond the reach of the Council's most sophisticated detection systems, something stirred. Something that had been waiting 73 cycles for exactly this conversation. The humans hadn't been silent from fear or ignorance. They had been silent because they were busy. Admiral Kalen Voss stood in the command center of the Prometheus, ascendant, watching the tactical hologram rotate slowly before him. The Supercarriers' bridge hummed with quiet efficiency. No dramatic declarations, no inspirational speeches. Just the calm professionalism of humanity's most lethal military. Force preparing for war. Signal analysis confirms it, Admiral, reported Commander Zara Nightingale from her station. The Council's authorized what they're calling pacification measures. Third Fleet of the Korthani hegemony, approximately 400 vessels heading for the Kepler 442 system. Voss nodded, his weathered face betraying nothing. At 63, he'd spent the last 30 years preparing for this moment, ever since humanity's first deep space reconnaissance probes had encountered the Council's border patrols and barely escaped detection. "Estimated arrival at Kepler 442? He asked. 17 hours, sir. More than enough time." Voss turned to face the massive view screen showing the starfield ahead. To most observers, it appeared empty, just another patch of void between systems. But Voss knew better. "Captain Torvin, signal the fleet. Operation Silent Thunder is now active." Across a volume of space larger than most solar systems, reality began to shimmer and twist. One by one, humanity's greatest secret revealed itself. The Ghost Fleet, cloaked in gravimetric displacement fields that bent light and sensor waves around them like water around stones, 47 supercarriers materialized from nothingness. Each vessel stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, their hulls black as the void itself, armed with weapon systems that pushed the boundaries of known physics. The Prometheus Ascendant served as flagship, but her sister ships were equally formidable. Event Horizon, Stellar Grave, Dark Matter, Void Walker, names that would soon echo across the galaxy like thunder. "Status report on the carrier groups," Voss commanded. Fleet Coordinator Axel Drakmors. Fingers danced across his interface. "All vessels reporting ready status. Hyperdrive spools are charged, fighter complements are armed and ready for launch. The new boys are eager to test their toys against real targets." The new boys were humanity's latest development, quantum fighters that existed in a state of controlled superposition, allowing them to phase in and out of normal space at will. Each supercarrier held 3,000 of these craft, along with their pilots, the most ruthlessly trained and augmented humans in the species' history. "Intelligence update on enemy capabilities?" Voss inquired. Lieutenant Commander Vera Shadowhawk looked up from her analysis station. "The Korthani favor energy weapons and particle beams. Impressive against conventional armor, but our metamaterial hulls should absorb and redirect most of their output. Their ships are fast but lightly armored, built for intimidation rather than prolonged combat. They've never faced an enemy that didn't surrender after the first volley," added Drakmor with grim satisfaction. "They're about to learn why silence isn't always golden." Voss walked to the tactical display, studying the approaching enemy formation. 400 ships seemed like overwhelming force to most civilizations, but humanity had learned the hard way that in the cosmos, numerical superiority meant nothing without technological advantage. "The Council thinks we're primitive," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the bridge. "They think our silence represents fear or ignorance. They've spent 73 years assuming we were too stupid to understand their invitation." He paused, watching as the tactical display updated with new intelligence from their deep cover reconnaissance assets embedded within Council space. "They never considered the possibility that we understood perfectly, and chose not to respond because we had nothing to say to them yet." His smile was cold as stellar ice. "Now we do." The massive supercarriers began moving through hyperspace, their passage undetectable to Council sensors. Behind them, scattered across dozens of systems, humanity's true strength stirred. Automated shipyards working around the clock, quantum research facilities pushing the boundaries of science, and most importantly, a population united by a single, burning purpose. The Council had ruled the galaxy for millennia, secure in their superiority. They were about to discover that silence and primitive were not synonymous. The Korthani Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442, system with all the pomp and ceremony their species favored. 400 warships arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with ceremonial markings that proclaimed the glory of the hegemony. Fleet Commander Zethric stood on the bridge of his flagship, the dreadnought Sovereign's Wrath, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The human colony on the fourth planet showed all the signs of a thriving settlement: orbital platforms, shipping lanes, industrial complexes. It would make an excellent example for the other primitive species watching from the galactic sidelines. Standard. Intimidation formation, he ordered, his mandibles clacking with authority. Broadcast the surrender demand on all frequencies. These humans will kneel like all the others. The fleet began its stately advance toward the inner system, weapons charging in unison. The display was carefully choreographed. Overwhelming force deployed with mathematical precision to break the enemy's will before the first shot was fired. Commander, his sensor operator chittered nervously. I'm detecting some unusual readings from the outer system. Gravitational anomalies that don't match stellar charts. Zethric barely glanced at the data. Solar wind variations, irrelevant. Continue the advance. What he dismissed as solar wind was actually 47 human supercarriers decloaking in perfect synchronization, their massive forms materializing from the void like nightmares given substance. Admiral Voss watched the enemy formation with the detached interest of a scientist studying insects. Beautiful formation, he observed. Textbook intimidation tactics. They're broadcasting their surrender demand now. Shall I respond, Admiral? Asked Nightingale. In the traditional human manner, Voss replied. Fire! The opening salvo erased 30 Korthani vessels from existence before their sensors even registered the human fleet's presence. Antimatter torpedoes moving at 90% light speed struck shields and armor that had never faced such concentrated fury. The ceremonial formations dissolved into chaos as ships tried desperately to understand what was killing them. Impossible! Zethric screamed as his tactical display lit up with proximity alarms. Where did they come from? How many ships? His answer came in the form of 9,000 quantum fighters phasing into normal space directly within his formation. The small craft flickered in and out of existence like deadly ghosts, their weapons tearing through Korthani hulls with surgical precision. Commander Drakmor monitored the battle from his station aboard the Prometheus Ascendant, watching as the human fighters demonstrated their technological superiority. Phase tactics are working perfectly. Enemy point defense can't target what isn't there half the time. The Korthani fleet tried to adapt, spreading their formation and concentrating fire on individual human vessels. Their particle beams struck the metamaterial hulls of the supercarriers and simply disappeared, absorbed and converted into additional power for the human weapons systems. Energy absorption at optimal levels, reported Shadowhawk. They're literally charging our weapons. For us, Zethric watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated around him. These weren't the primitive stone throwers the Council had described. These were apex predators, perfectly evolved for void warfare, wielding weapons that defied understanding. Retreat, he ordered. Full reverse. Signal the Council. His final words were cut short as the Prometheus Ascendant's main battery spoke. The quantum cascade weapon opened a temporary hole in space-time itself, and the Sovereign's wrath was pulled into the resulting gravitational anomaly, compressed to a point of infinite density in nanoseconds. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it ended, the Kepler 442 system contained the wreckage of 400 Korthani vessels and exactly 0 human casualties. Voss studied the aftermath with grim satisfaction. Casualty report? Minimal damage to 3 fighters. Paint scratched by debris. No injuries, no losses, Drakmor reported. Good. Signal the fleet. Prepare for hyperspace jump. The Council is about to receive our formal introduction, and I want to make sure we arrive before their messenger drones. As the human supercarriers prepared to jump deeper into Council space, their quantum fighters began a methodical sweep of the battlefield, ensuring no survivors remained to carry tales of humanity's capabilities back to their masters. The Council had wanted to meet the humans. Soon, they would have their wish. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened. in chaos. Representatives from across the galaxy materialized via quantum entanglement communicators, their forms flickering as overloaded networks struggled to maintain connections. The great chamber that had witnessed millennia of ordered debate now echoed with panic. High Arbiter Kepharon's crystalline form pulsed with agitated frequencies as she processed the incoming reports. "Confirm the data stream," she commanded. "Total fleet annihilation in under 1 standard hour." Ambassador Vex Thul's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme distress among his species. "The reconnaissance drones we dispatched to investigate have also gone silent. Whatever the humans unleashed at Kepler 442 appears to be advancing into our territory." Warlord Drakmor slammed his fist against his throne's armrest, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. "Impossible! 400 ships don't just vanish. The Korthani Third Fleet was equipped with the finest weapons the hegemony could produce." "The finest conventional weapons," corrected Counselor Nixara, her serpentine form coiled tighter than usual. "The intelligence reports streaming in from our deep space monitoring station suggest we may have miscalculated regarding human technological development." The chamber's central hologram shifted to display the latest sensor data from the border regions. Red warning indicators flashed across multiple systems as automated monitoring stations went dark one by one, creating an expanding sphere of silence that marked the advance of something unprecedented. "They're not just attacking military targets," observed Representative Korthak of the Maluvian Trade Confederation. "Industrial platforms, research stations, communication relays, everything, with a council signature, is being systematically eliminated." High Arbiter Kepharon's form shifted through several color spectrums, a display of agitation that hadn't been seen in the council chambers for centuries. "The pattern suggests coordinated strikes across a front spanning 17 light-years. The logistics alone should be impossible for a species confined to primitive fusion drives." "Unless they aren't primitive," Drakmor growled. "Unless we've been watching shadows while they built an empire in the dark." The implications hung in the chamber like a toxic cloud. For millennia, the Council's intelligence services had monitored emerging civilizations with casual confidence, secure in their technological superiority. The possibility that they had missed something this significant was almost incomprehensible. "Motion to deploy the first armada," Vex Thul announced, his voice struggling to maintain its usual authority. "If these humans have somehow acquired advanced weapons, we respond with overwhelming force. 20,000 ships should be sufficient to insufficient." The voice cut through the chamber like a blade through silk, emanating from every communication array simultaneously. The word itself seemed to carry weight that pressed against the minds of every representative present. The central hologram flickered and reformed, displaying not tactical data, but a single human face, weathered, calm, and utterly without fear. Admiral Voss appeared to be speaking from the bridge of a vessel so advanced that the Council's sensors couldn't properly parse its architecture. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Voss continued, his voice carrying across the stunned chamber. "Allow me to formally introduce humanity to this august body. I am Admiral Kalen Voss of the Terran Deep Fleet, speaking from the supercarrier Prometheus Ascendant." The chamber erupted in panicked chittering, resonating and roaring as representatives tried to understand how their most secure communications had been so easily penetrated. "You have spent 73 years attempting to contact Earth," Voss continued, unperturbed by the chaos. "You interpreted our silence as primitive ignorance. You were mistaken. We were listening. We were learning. Most importantly, we were preparing." High Arbiter Kepharon managed to regain enough composure to respond. "What do you want, human? What are your terms?" Voss's smile was cold as the void between stars. "Terms? You misunderstand the situation, Arbiter. This isn't a negotiation. This is a notification. The Galactic Council's authority over this galaxy is hereby terminated." "You cannot possibly," Vex Thul began. "I can. And I will, Voss interrupted. Your 20,000 ship armada is already under observation by my advanced scouts. Your homeworlds are being surveyed by assets you cannot detect. Your communication networks have been compromised so thoroughly that this conversation is being broadcast to every species under Council rule. The truth of his words became apparent as confirmation signals flooded in from across the galaxy. The transmission was indeed reaching every world, every station, every vessel in Council space. Surrender is not required, Voss concluded. Resistance, however, will be met with proportional response. You have 48 hours to begin the orderly dissolution of the Council and withdrawal of all military forces to your respective home systems. Any attempt to maintain the current power structure will be treated as an act of war. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in absolute silence. The age of the Galactic Council was over. 47 hours and 36 minutes after Admiral Voss's ultimatum, the Galactic Council made their reply. The combined armada, 23,000 vessels representing the military might of 17 different species, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system in the largest show of force the galaxy had ever witnessed. High Admiral Kelixtar of the Hegemony stood at the center of the fleet's command nexus, a massive space station serving as a mobile headquarters for the unprecedented alliance. Around him, holographic representations of the other fleet commanders flickered with barely contained aggression. The humans chose defiance, he announced to the assembled war leaders. So be it. Today we remind the galaxy why the Council has maintained order for 3 millennia. The Armada arranged itself in a formation that had conquered hundreds of worlds, overlapping fields of fire, redundant command structures, and enough firepower to glass entire continents. It was beautiful in its terrible efficiency, a testament to the Council's military doctrine refined over countless campaigns. What they found waiting for them in Sol space defied all tactical understanding. The human response wasn't 24,000 ships to match their numbers. It wasn't even the 47 supercarriers that had appeared at previous engagements. Instead, the Terran Deep Fleet had deployed something that rendered traditional mathematics meaningless, a single construct that stretched across the entire width of the inner solar system. The World Engine was humanity's masterwork, a mobile space station the size of a small moon, bristling with weapon systems that operated on principles the Council's scientists had never imagined. It hung in space like a metallic planet, its surface alive with construction bays launching an endless stream of vessels. Admiral Voss stood in the construct's primary command center, watching the tactical display with professional interest. Enemy, count, 23,417 vessels, reported Fleet Coordinator Drakmore. Impressive formation discipline. They've clearly been practicing. Weapon status? Commander Nightingale's voice was steady as starlight. All systems optimal. The quantum foundries are producing fighters faster than our launch bays can deploy them. Current production rate, 1,000 units per minute. Voss nodded, studying the approaching armada. They're broadcasting surrender demands. Standard. Council protocol, kneel or be destroyed. Shall I respond, Admiral? No need. I think our response will be self-evident. The World Engine opened fire. What followed couldn't properly be called a battle. The human construct unleashed weapons that rewrote the fundamental laws of local space-time. Gravitational lances tore through enemy formations like cosmic can openers. Reality bombs created expanding spheres of altered physics that converted matter to energy on contact. Most terrifying of all were the temporal disruptors, weapons that aged enemy vessels thousands of years in seconds, reducing proud warships to cosmic dust. High Admiral Kelixtar watched his carefully coordinated fleet dissolve into chaos as forces beyond his comprehension tore through ships that had seemed invincible moments before. All units, evasive maneuvers. Concentrate fire on the central structure. The concentrated fire of thousands of weapons struck the world engine's shields and simply disappeared, absorbed by exotic matter configurations that converted energy into additional construction materials. The human construct actually grew larger as the enemy bombarded it. "Impossible!" breathed Warseer Vorthan of the Dominion. "They're using our attacks to build more weapons." "Retreat," Kelxatar ordered. "Signal all commands, general withdrawal." But withdrawal required intact hyperdrive systems, and the human quantum fighters were systematically disabling every engine in the armada. The small craft phased through shields as if they weren't there, their weapons precisely targeting the components needed for faster-than-light travel. Within 3 hours, the greatest military force in galactic history was reduced to floating debris and disabled hulks. The survivors found themselves prisoners aboard vessels that could fold space around themselves, transported to holding facilities that existed in dimensions the Council's science couldn't map. Voss walked among the captured command staff in the World Engine's detention center, observing the beings who had ruled the galaxy through fear and superior firepower. They looked smaller now, their proud uniforms torn and stained, their weapons confiscated by guards whose armor incorporated technologies that made Council science look like children's toys. "You were warned," he said quietly, his words translated by systems that understood languages the Council had never encountered. "You chose to test humanity's resolve. I hope the lesson was instructive." High Admiral Kelxatar raised his head from where he sat against the detention cell's wall. What are you?" Voss considered the question seriously. "We are what happens when a species spends 73 years preparing for war while everyone else assumes they're too primitive to matter. We are the iron tide that sweeps away false gods and broken systems." He turned to leave, then paused, at the cell's entrance. "The Council is dissolved. Your worlds are free to govern themselves as they see fit, provided they extend the same courtesy to others. Any attempt to rebuild the old power structures will result in permanent intervention." As Voss walked away, the sound of his footsteps echoed through corridors that hummed with the power of technologies that would reshape the galaxy. The iron tide had reached its destination. Now came the harder task, building something better from the wreckage. 6 months after the dissolution of the Galactic Council, the first Terran Diplomatic Corps vessel dropped out of hyperspace at Zerion Prime, former capital of the hegemony. The sleek courier ship Olive Branch was deliberately modest, a stark contrast to the massive supercarriers that had announced humanity's arrival on the galactic stage. Ambassador Lydia Stormwind stepped through the airlock into the station's receiving bay, her diplomatic credentials flickering in the universal translator field. Behind her walked a small security detail and a team of technical advisors, all carefully chosen to project competence without threat. The welcoming committee was a study in barely controlled anxiety. Former High Administrator Zephyrain of the hegemony's civil service stood flanked by representatives from dozens of species, all struggling to understand their new reality in a galaxy where humanity held ultimate authority. "Ambassador Stormwind," Zephyrain began, his mandibles clicking with nervous energy, "the Provisional Council welcomes you to Zerion Prime. We hope this meeting will establish productive relations between our peoples." Stormwind smiled, her expression carefully calibrated to convey warmth without condescension. "Former Administrator, the pleasure is mine. I trust the transition has proceeded smoothly." "As smoothly as possible," admitted Zephyrain. "The dissolution of military commands has been challenging. Some species are struggling with the concept of self-governance after millennia of council oversight." They walked through corridors that had once hummed with the business of galactic administration. Now the grand chambers that had housed the council's bureaucracy served as meeting spaces for dozens of newly independent governments attempting to find their place in the post-council galaxy. The Zelthani Collective has requested mediation in their territorial dispute with the Maluvian Trade Confederation. Zephrane continued as they entered the main assembly hall. The Vorthak Dominion is adjusting to civilian leadership. Several minor species have petitioned for protection against potential raids. Stormwind nodded, studying the massive chamber where representatives from across the galaxy had once rubber-stamped the Council's edicts. Today it buzzed with genuine debate as free species worked out the mechanics of cooperation without coercion. "The Terran position remains unchanged," she said, as they took their seats at what had once been the High Arbiter's platform. "Humanity has no interest in replacing the Council as galactic overlords. We will provide assistance to those who request it, mediation for those who need it, and protection for those who cannot protect themselves. And if conflicts arise that cannot be resolved through diplomacy?" asked Representative Korthak, the former trade official now serving as an elected spokesperson for his people. "Then humanity will intervene with exactly the minimum force necessary to restore stability," Stormwind replied. "No more, no less. Our goal is a galaxy where every species can pursue its own destiny without fear of conquest or subjugation." The assembly fell silent as the implications sank in. For the first time in galactic history, the dominant power was offering freedom rather than demanding submission. From the observer's gallery, Admiral Voss watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. The Prometheus Ascendant held position, at the edge of the system, close enough to respond to any threat, far enough away to avoid seeming like intimidation. "Initial reactions from the homeworlds?" he asked Commander Nightingale. "Mixed, but generally positive," she reported. "The hegemony's civilian population is celebrating the end of military conscription. The Dominion is struggling with the transition to elected leadership, but their younger generation seems enthusiastic about the changes. The smaller species are requesting technical assistance and trade agreements." Voss nodded, watching as the assembly below began organizing itself into working committees. "Resistance movements?" 17 confirmed groups attempting to restore Council authority, Fleet Coordinator Drakmore answered from his station. "All monitored, none presenting immediate threats. The Korthani military remnants in the Epsilon sector have been contained by local peacekeeping forces." "Good. Maintain current deployment patterns but reduce the visible military presence by another 20%. These people need to learn they can solve their own problems without looking over their shoulders for approval or punishment." On the station below, Ambassador Stormwind was addressing the Assembly's concerns about trade route security and resource allocation, mundane matters that were the foundation of peaceful civilization. For 73 years, humanity had watched from the shadows as the Council maintained order through fear. Now they would demonstrate that cooperation was stronger than coercion. The galaxy was learning to govern itself, species by species, system by system. It wasn't always smooth. Freedom never was, but it was genuine. The iron tide had swept away the old order, and in its wake, something unprecedented was taking root. A truly free galactic community. Standing in his flagship's observation deck, Admiral Voss watched the lights of 1,000 worlds scattered across the stellar map. Each point of light represented millions of beings who would never again live under the heel of self-appointed masters. The age of empires was ending. 5 years after the fall of the Galactic Council, the galaxy had settled into a new rhythm. Trade flowed freely along routes once controlled by Council bureaucrats. Scientific cooperation flourished between species that had been kept deliberately isolated. Art, music, and literature spread across star systems as cultures finally had the freedom to share their achievements. In the depths of the Sol system, the world engine had transformed from a weapon of war into something unprecedented, a mobile university and research center where the galaxy's brightest minds worked together on projects that would have been impossible under the Council's restrictive regime. Dr. Elena Voidwalker stood in the construct's primary laboratory, watching as hegemony crystallographers worked alongside Dominion metallurgists and collective bioengineers to solve problems that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. The Universal Translator field hummed with excited discussions in dozens of languages as breakthrough followed breakthrough. The Quantum Agriculture Project has exceeded all projections, reported her research coordinator, Dr. Marcus Starfall. Food scarcity should be eliminated in the Outer Rim systems within 2 years. The terraforming initiatives are showing similar promise. Voidwalker nodded, studying the holographic displays showing projects spread across the galaxy. Medical, research. The collaborative effort on cellular regeneration has produced results none of our species achieved independently. The Zelthani longevity treatments combined with human genetic therapy and Maluvian neural enhancement, we're looking at lifespans that could extend indefinitely. It was remarkable how quickly the galaxy's peoples had adapted to cooperation once the artificial barriers were removed. Species that had been enemies for millennia discovered they shared common goals and complementary capabilities. Admiral Voss, now bearing the title Director of Terran Strategic Operations, reviewed the latest intelligence reports from across the galaxy. His hair had grown grayer in the 5 years since the war, but his eyes remained sharp as he processed information from thousands of monitoring stations. "Status report on potential threats?" he asked his intelligence chief, Colonel Aria Darkstream. "Minimal and decreasing," she replied. The last Council restoration movement was disbanded 6 months ago when their own people voted them out of power. The Outer Rim pirate cartels have been eliminated by joint task forces. No Terran intervention required. 3 minor territorial disputes were resolved through mediation last quarter. New membership applications for the Galactic Cooperation Treaty, 17 species this month, bringing the total to 431 signatories. The treaty framework is holding. Mutual defense, free trade, technology sharing, and non-interference in internal affairs. Voss allowed himself a small smile. The treaty had been humanity's greatest diplomatic achievement, a document that codified the principles they'd fought to establish without creating another authoritarian structure. Each species maintained sovereignty while agreeing to principles of mutual respect and cooperation. "Admiral," Darkstream continued, "there is one item of note. Deep space monitoring has detected what appears to be an extragalactic signal, something approaching from the Andromeda direction." Voss's attention sharpened immediately. Classification? Unknown. The signal suggests massive artificial constructs, possibly a migration fleet. Estimated arrival at galactic edge, 18 months. Through the command center's viewports, the lights of human civilization spread across the solar system like jewels scattered on black velvet. Earth herself had become the unofficial diplomatic capital of the galaxy, hosting trade negotiations and cultural exchanges between species that had never imagined they could be friends. But beyond the edge of the galaxy, something vast was approaching. Something that would test whether the new order humanity had created was strong enough to survive contact with the truly unknown. Voss stood and walked to the tactical display, watching as predictive algorithms traced the incoming signal's path. "Signal the fleet commanders, begin discreet defensive preparations, and contact Ambassador Stormwind. It's time to discuss galactic unity with our new allies." "Sir?" Darkstream asked. "Shouldn't we wait until we know more about the threat?" Voss turned to face his staff, his expression calm but determined. "Colonel, for 73 years humanity prepared in silence for the war we knew was coming. Now we have allies, friends, and partners spread across the galaxy. We won't face whatever's approaching alone." In research facilities across 100 worlds, scientists looked up from their experiments as priority communications arrived. In the great assembly halls where the new Galactic Cooperation Treaty met in rotating sessions, representatives began receiving briefings on potential external threats. In the depths of space, the automated shipyards that had built humanity's fleet began tooling up for new construction. not weapons of conquest, but instruments of defense for a free galaxy. The Iron Tide had swept away the old order and built something better in its place. Now that achievement would face its ultimate test. In the vast darkness between galaxies, something ancient and hungry had noticed the sudden silence where the Galactic Council's transmissions had once echoed across the void. It was coming to investigate, and it would find not a galaxy of subjects bowing to their masters, but a community of free peoples who had learned that together they were stronger than any empire. The silent guardians of humanity's greatest achievement were about to become very vocal indeed. 100 years later, children across the galaxy would learn the story in schools built on worlds that had never known conquest. They would study the moment when humanity chose to remain silent not from fear, but from wisdom, understanding that the greatest strength sometimes comes from letting others reveal their weakness first. The approaching extragalactic threat had indeed arrived, bringing with it technologies and challenges that no single species could have faced alone. But the free galaxy that humanity had helped create proved stronger than any empire. The bonds forged in cooperation, rather than forged in conquest, held firm against forces that had shattered countless civilizations. In the end, the galaxy's children would remember not the thunder of humanity's supercarriers burning across the void, but the quiet moment when a species chose to listen instead of speak, to prepare instead of posture, and to build bridges instead of walls. The Council had mocked Earth's silence. The galaxy celebrated it as the beginning of a new age of freedom among the stars.